The moment you step into Clair Obscur, you're met with a broken world, a fractured facsimile of Paris. The twisted silhouette of the Eiffel Tower makes this abundantly clear, and once you turn your gaze behind you, your eyes meet the oppressive presence of the monolith, guarding the horizon with an otherworldly aura and an ominous number. At the foot of the monolith sits the paintress. Every year, on the same day, without fail, the paintress paints a new number on the monolith, counting down. Every year, on that day, everyone of that numbered age will die. To combat this despair, Lumiere created the expeditions, sending swaths of people every year to fight the paintress. 67 failed expeditions later, we arrive here in the present day, Expedition 33, where you, as Gustave and his warband of expeditioners, prepare to embark on a journey to a strange land and reach the paintress to end her reign, so that she may never paint death again. I had written this review quite a while ago, closer to just after Expedition 33's release, and although this isn't the first review I've ever written, this is the first review I will have ever published on this channel. I remember recently how this game made me feel, and every time it did, I felt compelled to come back and finish what I started. Recently too, something personal happened that gave me the final push I needed to stop procrastinating. That, and with the Game Awards on the horizon, it was basically now or never. So, here we are. Nice to meet you. When Expedition 33 dropped in the shadow of Oblivion Remaster's release, I thought it unfortunate that what seemed like an interesting game at the time would be glossed over in favor of a more well-established IP. Little did anyone know how effective the word-of-mouth marketing would be for this game. In retrospect, dropping on Game Pass alongside the Oblivion Remaster might have been the biggest brain move the developers could have possibly made. When the nostalgia's being satiated, what better RPG to try than the one that's been sitting there waiting for us all this time? It's very rare for you to know in the moment that you're playing a game that you'll remember for the rest of your life. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is one of those games. It's a game that consumed my life for the week that came after its release, and I already wish that I could experience it again for the first time. I felt that I had to talk about it. Having played the game across the span of over 100 hours, completing every piece of main and side content I could find, and getting every achievement in the game as well as doing a New Game Plus run, I've had the chance to really sink my teeth into the experience that Expedition 33 has to offer. To understand what makes Clair Obscur Expedition 33 so special, we have to talk about the developers of the game. The common story is that Sandfall Interactive, a team of 30 people, made this game. People who previously worked at Ubisoft who branched off to make their own game studio and do their own thing. And thus, this game was born. But that's only half the story. Of course, counting external hires and contractors, this game didn't literally only have 30 people working on it. But that's true of any studio of any size. And it's a given that you'll have many hands on deck in many departments, though you'll be hard-pressed to find games that look this good whilst only having a core workforce this small. According to their website and interviews, only Guillaume and Tom, the creative director and lead programmer respectively, came from Ubisoft. The rest of the core team were mostly fresh talent, for many of whom this was their first game, and now they have one hell of a gold star on their resume. their composer for the game's soundtrack, they found him on SoundCloud, by the way, that they were able to assemble such a brilliant team from mostly fledgling talent is beyond impressive. It speaks leagues about what can be accomplished in an environment where ideas can be freely implemented, detached from the oppressive and sluggish bureaucracy of a corporate middleman. When developers are allowed to make the games that they want, we get games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Expedition 33. This is what happens when passion is put at the forefront of game development. The first 30 minutes of this game had me in a vice grip, laying out the stakes and presenting poignant emotional beats that culminate in a beautiful climax. I want to try my best to illustrate this without spoilers, but basically the entire game is like this. Incredibly well-written, expressive characters with stellar performances that have you feeling everything they do, all with unique temperaments and motivations that weave an enthralling narrative with drama, triumph, and heartbreak. They're flawed, grounded individuals with relatable struggles that you can't really help but feel for. And most commendably, the game isn't afraid of injecting light-hearted moments that have you laughing and crying with these characters. The dialogue is phenomenal. Characters talk like real people, speaking over each other or pausing where subtext can be laid bare. It's not an exaggeration to say that these are some of the best performances I've seen in a video game, period.
Things change in the field.
There's a reason.
Protocol doesn't cover every contingency. You know that.
There's a reason it's protocol. We designed it to yield the optimal result in the vast majority of situations.
In my opinion, a hallmark of a good mystery is one where the story drip feeds information and rewards the audience for paying attention, offering enough detail for an observant viewer to unravel the mystery moments before the reveal, and validating theories with sparingly used exposition that doesn't feel out of place. It also gives players a reason to rewatch cutscenes in another playthrough, witnessing all the breadcrumbs laid out before them with knowledge of the context, and allowing you to understand the careful consideration and level of detail that the writers put into Expedition 33's narrative. There's a lot more I could talk about in service to the game's themes and narrative, so much that it could be its own video, but I'll let you be the one to discover it. Sandfall have done an exceptional job at building a world that feels inhabited, or at the very least, feels crafted with soul and intention. You'll be hard-pressed to find a location that isn't visually stunning. It's especially impressive that they've managed to keep a consistent thematic aesthetic with diverse biomes and environments that keep everything feeling cohesive and part of the same world. And what a world it is! There are plenty of side areas with optional content to explore, each with its own rewards and surprises that really tickle that urge for exploration. The music, of course, slaps. Every track feels right at home where it plays with such a varied arsenal of sound, from haunting vocals that exude ominous environmental mysticism to some of the jazziest combat themes you'll have ever heard in your life. The gameplay is what I lovingly describe as if Persona and Super Mario RPG had a baby. You get the stylish and smooth flowing menus, animations, and cinematography that really eases the friction of a typical turn-based RPG experience of old, combined with the interactivity of Super Mario RPG's games that allow you to really respond to enemy attacks either with dodging or Sekiro-style parrying mechanics. And let me tell you, parrying is tight, but it feels really good. You're rewarded with extra damage too for mastering that part of the game. This makes fights both tactical and engaging, with enough buildcraft to either ignore those mechanics entirely in favor of defense, or the option to skill your way through every encounter in the game. Those aren't the only RPG influences present. If you look around, you can draw parallels to a lot of franchises, which really only reinforces the notion that Expedition 33 is a love letter to the genre. Each expedition member has their own unique mechanic to play around, with perks tied to unique weapons that you find throughout the game. Combine this with Pictos, which are stat boosters with passive effects that you can allocate with a point system, and you get a surprising amount of build diversity for you to play around with. The game has a proper challenging difficulty curve as well, with added mechanics and varied attack patterns as the game goes on. Apparently it's challenging enough that some people are leaving negative reviews on the Steam page about it. But where the game begins to slightly unravel for me is in its third act. And that's due to a variety of reasons, and a lot of which has to do with how Act 3 is structured and set up. Minor spoilers ahead. After Act 2 concludes and Act 3 begins, you're thrust back into the open world with places that were previously inaccessible to you now accessible via the power of flight. The world is now your oyster. You want to explore some flying islands? Go ahead. You can do whatever you want. If you're like me, you'd probably be compelled to finish all of the side content before tackling the final boss and closing the curtain on the game, which was exactly what I did. I did every area and collected every collectible outside of the final zone, which was a mistake. By the time I reached the final boss, I one-shot him. I wasn't trying to run a busted build or anything. He died, and I didn't even get a chance to see his attack patterns or hear his music. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make a game more accessible through buildcraft. The devs do want you to finish the game after all, but to kill the final boss without even trying just wasn't fun to me. There was no sense of accomplishment there. The worst part, for me, is the ludonarrative dissonance that came with it. If you don't know what ludonarrative dissonance is, it's when the narrative being told through the game's non-interactive elements conflict with the narrative being told through the gameplay. Why is this an issue? Because narratively, I shouldn't be one-shotting a final boss and have the cast tell me how tough of a fight that was immediately after. The stakes are diminished in that way. The game has a structure and balance problem in Act 3, and I blame it entirely on one picto, Painted Power. Painted Power is a picto you receive after beating Act 2, and equipping it removes the game's damage cap of 9999, meaning if you build your characters right, you can deal comical amounts of damage. There are videos of people dealing billions of damage with the right setup. People have one-shot the super boss in all of its phases without even seeing a single part of its moveset. Some people didn't even know that the boss had a third phase until it was already over. Now, I'm all for experimentation, but I really felt that this was an upgrade that should have been given to players for a New Game Plus playthrough, and instead balancing the rest of the game around the damage cap for the first playthrough. But just to be clear, I'm not condemning the practice of breaking the game. That's another thing entirely. I'm just referring to the narrative consequences involved with boss balance in Act 3. You miss out on a lot of wonderful things when you clear bosses too quickly. Stellar music, for one, but also dialogue that never gets heard because the boss never gets a turn in. The third act of the game throws you in a bit of a catch-22 in a way. Do you A, finish all the side content first, which includes important character moments and story beats, then attempt to finish the final boss and dog walk him into the ground? Or do you B, do the final boss first for a fair fight and do the side content later, triggering the story beats out of order? The answer is neither. The correct answer is to do the character quests and only the character quests as soon as Act 3 begins and then do the final boss. For a blind playthrough, I don't know how I was expected to know this, but a friend of mine happened to do it in exactly that order, and he still two-shot the final boss. The easiest way to get around this is to remove Painted Power for the final boss. But like I said, you wouldn't really know to do that until it was already over. One thing I'd love to see in a DLC for Expedition 33 is to include bosses with more varied mechanics. Like this Lamp Master boss, where you have to shoot the lamps in the right order or the boss hits you with a very hard attack. Maybe something like a puzzle you have to solve mid-fight to bring down a shield before you can do any damage, or surviving a certain amount of turns and performing mechanics to reduce the damage you can take. Ways to make the endgame fights a challenge that you can still engage with and pose a proper challenge that you cannot brute force. Fights that feel earned when you finally claim victory. I've been yapping and complaining a lot about a game I've been glazing for the past 15 minutes. But make no mistake, games of this quality and integrity deserve to stand in the same arena as the industry titans, regardless of who makes them. After all, it makes it all the more embarrassing when the titans fall. Is Expedition 33 going to be Game of the Year? I think that's the wrong question to ask. What we should be asking instead is how we as consumers can use our buying power to establish a standard where more games like Expedition 33, games that embody a love of the craft, get the attention they deserve. And as long as we're smart with our wallets and studios like Sandfall exist, well, we might get there one day. Remember, all games can be considered art, but not all art is created equal. Because if you've ever felt burnt by a publisher exacting their greed on your time and money, give Clair Obscur Expedition 33 a go. You'll never look back.